Look at you, war crime. Oh, thank you for joining me another episode of Beating Cancer Today, the podcast where hope meets action. I'm your host, Kevin Hennings, a stage 4 colorectal cancer survivor. Against all odds, I defied the doctor's predictions and took my health into my own. Now, I'm here to share my journey and alternative methods that help me. But it's not just about my story. It's about yours too. Join me as we navigate through the challenges of cancer together, providing support, insights, and empowerment. Together, we'll beat cancer, one episode at a time. Making what is required to heal my body. Cholesterol is a healing agent.
Right. Yeah, we have to have it. Right.
And 75% of your brain is cholesterol, if not more, right? So why am I suppressing what my body's creating? I've already changed my lifestyle to eliminate the excess cholesterol anyway. Mm-hmm. I think this is a slippery slope. Am I crazy?
Well, it's possible, yes. And so, but that's why we should not be prescribing statin drugs to everybody because they have a high cholesterol, and it's not a problem for everybody.
Oh, I wish I had stats. I wish I had, if my producer, if Chris was on here, he would tell me stats. But I think statin drugs are like the number, or they're supposed to be predicted to be the number one, if not this year, next year, or whatever it is, drug that's prescribed.
Yeah.
So
right.
So we're not fixing the problem, right? We're prescribing more.
Yeah, we're just trying to, do an interruption, and so quality of life is important, as far as quantity. So, there's a select group of people that, cholesterol can be an issue. Matter of fact, this is such a learning process. There's even a new issue, and this is going to freak some people out. But anyway, HDL, which is we think is the good cholesterol, if it's too high, and it definitely can, there's a genetic issue. If it's too high, that actually increases the risk of dementia and osteoporosis. And so, so even the good one can be too high. We're now learning because there's actually subfractions in the LDLs and they mean different components. Same thing with the HDL, the good one, there's good and bad parts of that HDL genetically and I have some people who, usually it's more women, but I see more women than men. But HDL that now is 80, 90, and 100 is actually too high. And it actually is going to create plaque issues and increased risk of plaque inside in blood vessels in the heart, but it's more like dementia and bone loss. And it's like the little tiny capillaries are getting blocked out. And when those capillaries get blocked, now the cancer cells, brain cells and bone cells start dying out. So the only people that I don't really see success, so long as they're trying, eating right, lifestyle, and supplements that don't get better are these ones with this HDL that is like above 80. And so they're the ones that we don't know for sure what to do about this. I'm talking to cardiovascular experts, and they don't know either. So it's kind of a newer recognized thing. But I've been seeing this now for 15 years. And
but you mentioned the level, right? Why is the level continuing to be decreased? Like 300 was high cholesterol before. Now it's all the way down to 150. Is there any connection with the amount of statins? I mean, who's the one who says what's too high? And when a statin should be prescribed? Would it be Big Pharma that is calling that? Yes. I mean, because it's come down. Is it a miracle that it just came down? Like all of a sudden now that, why the numbers? Why? Yeah,
exactly. Well, pharma and the drug companies are the ones that are, driving these numbers. And there is some research showing that, in a population level, if we can get these numbers down, there's going to be fewer risks of heart attacks and strokes. There are statistics showing that. But then, that's only going to actually help a small number of people. What are the side effects and problems of the rest of the people?
Their communication really sucks. You'd think that if they communicated this and say, hey, listen, just so everybody knows, we're not up to some sneaky stuff over here. No, just so everybody knows, the reason why we're lowering this down is because there's been studies at XYZ, whatever. Mm-hmm. Instead, they just kind of do it behind closed doors, and they just assume that we're sheep and that we're just going to follow. Oh, okay, because you said so, and that's it. It's not cool. It's just, it just raises a lot of suspicion is all I'm saying.
Yes, that's right. And doctors, they're hooked for their business. Number one, doctors are trained to diagnose, and some of them are very skilled for surgeries. We do need them, but the hook for their business is actually those prescriptions. And therefore, with that meaning, okay, this person's cholesterol is high, and the accepted treatment protocol is a statin drug. So I'm following what the government says. I'm following what the insurance companies say. And now this patient has to come back and see me again. That's a hook for my business. So therefore, I'm going to do those things, including the statin drugs, for that. But there's actually a shift now due to, once again, social media, podcasts especially. People are starting to learn that, second, I need to do some, I'll call it critical thinking. Is this really good for me or not? That's exactly what we need. We need to be learning. We need to be reading labels. We need to be thinking through things and seeking some help sometimes. Everybody's different, and we don't want to waste our time, literally hundreds of hours or thousands of hours doing research. We need to seek out people that do know some things, that have some expertise in this area.
Here's a question, as it pertains to brain disease, right? And now they're calling this stuff the type 3 diabetes, mm-hmm. The dementia and Alzheimer's and whatnot. So if they're calling this the type 3 diabetes, obviously, I thought that this was because of the connection with cholesterol, but apparently there's a relationship to sugar, I'm guessing.
Yes.
So can you explain that?
Sure. Oh, yeah. And so, again, that's where this cancer and dementia things are very similar. Matter of fact, when clients come see me with either one of these, I'm giving them exactly the same guidelines. Exactly the same guidelines. But what happens is that elevated sugar, feeds cancer cells, makes it easy. Also, the elevated sugar damages the lining of the blood vessels. And once we get a wound, I got wounds here from playing with the dog and tree work. But once we have a wound there, now this is a rough area. And that's where, now scar tissue is going to start developing. That's an area also where the little tiny, it's called calyx, endocalyx inside the blood vessels loses that hair. Now it can't clean the inside of the blood vessels. Now we get more plaque buildup. And that means the blood vessels get narrower and narrower and narrower. Now cancer cells love poor circulation. They ferment kind of like sugars and yeast. Yeast growing and fermenting with sugars. And then, but if we have that decreased blood supply here, now we have dementia problems. It comes back to not only hour by hour, but day after day, year after year after year of damage to the blood vessels in our body. That's encouraging cancer growth. That's encouraging dementia. And so that's why they call it Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, because it's year after year of this actually subclinical, meaning, a blood glucose of 100, a fasting blood glucose of 100 year after year after year is going to increase your risk of dementia.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. And so, really our blood glucose should be a lot lower than that, and not counting 2 hours after a meal. How many people have like a 110 or below 2 hours after a meal? Back in biblical time, we referred to the biblical times a few times in this interview right here. So they didn't, the bread that Jesus broke for the Last Supper was not the same kind of bread I'm getting at the market today. And the thing sits on the shelf for weeks without molding. You can't go to Europe and get
a month-old bread. You can't do it. You can't get a day-old bread in Europe, so it's hard. It's tough to find a day-old bread there. So, so I do think that, revert back to caveman times.
Yes.
In the caveman, in prehistoric times, they made a kill and they feasted on that kill.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. That was the last time they eat until the next kill. Yeah. So
could be days.
I think that's what we're calling intermittent fasting today.
That's right.
So
we wake up in the morning, and if we think back, even just like just 400 years ago, 100 years ago, there wasn't refrigeration and food would go bad. And you think you woke up and poured yourself a box of cereal and some milk and ate that for breakfast? No way. Okay. And you had to go out and you had to go get your food. You had to go work. And so the odds of you actually eating first thing in the morning were probably pretty slim.
Yeah.
Even if and then you get nuts and seeds and fruits and vegetables and occasional meat, from a kill. That was not easy. It was hard work, and our body is made to fast.
Yeah.
And so, if you want to say biblical or any matter of fact, all religions do fasting.
Well, biologically, let's talk biologically. Throw religions and right. Biblical resources to the side for a second. Biologically, you're only built to process to evacuation one meal every 24 hours. So if I'm eating 3 times a day, I'm stacking a couple meals.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm stacking, and it's compounding, right? So I'm stacking 2 meals today. I'm evacuating 1 and then another 1 tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So now I have 4 meals on board, so it's just a slippery slope,
Oh yeah. And then, oh gosh, there's so many things, just, stacking, and, then you have the reabsorption, of toxins, from foods. And because that's one of the ways our body detoxes is elimination, through the bowel movement and urine. So if we got that stuff stacking in there and staying in there too long, now we're going to reabsorb nutrients.
I had a whole question on autophagy for you as it related to histamines. But I also have a question about comparing this ECGC. I know that you recommend that a lot for your clients, and it's a TKI, right? Is what it is, a tyrosine
inhibitor.
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce it really, but yeah, or TKI is what. So, can you tell us what TKI is as an inhibitor?
Well, inhibitor meaning, it's a chemical process that all cells will use, to survive, and in this case, green tea, and there's other nutrients that have some similar type actions to that to inhibit that action. And so I'm actually
that action being the digestion of, or the processing of glucose sugars. Yeah,
exactly. Yes. And so EGCG has the benefit that it decreases the absorption of the carbohydrates in the intestines anyway, and actually has several different anti-cancer, actions. And so literally there's probably more than a dozen type actions in the body, in this cancer cells. And it also helps decrease this amino acid conversion into L-glutamine. So that's one of my favorite things. So green tea, matcha, and or supplemental EGCG, before meals helps to decrease the absorption of some of those nutrients and decreases the impact of these growth chemicals. Let's just call it that.
Yeah, well, you had mentioned various kinds of cancer, which I did the research on it, and I was pretty impressed with how many different types of cancers, but specifically the HER2 and HER3, breast cancers. and the HER2, the genetic makeup of that. So that has been on our Facebook page and stuff like that. People, a lot of the hormonal based cancers, but a lot of the people with the breast cancer with a triple positive, or HER2 or HER3 or whatever the case may be, and it's always a mystery. It's those ones are tricky ones, So the EGCG
Right.
Was that's what kind of struck me.
Right.
I wasn't aware of it. Is it by prescription only?
It's actually a non-prescription, so it is a supplement. And
okay.
It is an extract from green tea. Now, black tea may have a tiny bit of it, but not worth it. But green tea does have it, so that is one way to get that. So I may drink. Well, I'll probably drink one, but closer to 2 green teas or matcha a day. And because that's got that in there. So the best time for me to drink that, in my mind and my clients, is I'm going to be drinking that before I eat my meal, not afterwards, not during. I want that on board in my intestines to decrease absorption of carbohydrates. And then it's in the blood system for a couple of hours. And so whenever those proteins are absorbed from the meal, it's going to decrease the conversion of the amino acids into L-glutamine. So it's got 2 basic things for, not counting other things like you mentioned. And there's a whole group of acronyms for all kinds of cancer growth chemicals in that. But it is like a drug in a way, because I have seen people take too much EGCG, not from drinking tea, but drinking green tea and taking EGCG capsules, end up with some liver damage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
that's relevant. Yeah.
And so it's kind of like, are the liver enzymes elevated because of the metastasis or the cancer maybe in the liver? And some people start off with that when I see them, or is it due to a chemical? And so, we're going with more like chemical type dosage levels. And I mean, it becomes more of a toxin, but also that's this whole thing. And so whether like any herbs, these are things that are, we're going with high enough doses to damage cancer cells. We run the risk of damaging our body.
Yeah, but you're talking about the damaging the liver, but is it damaging the liver, or is it damaging the liver only in the sense of a rise in liver enzymes?
Well, yes, liver enzymes, but a liver enzyme actually is released when a liver cell dies. And so, okay. So doctors say that's a function test. Liver enzymes are not a function test. Liver enzymes are actually AST and ALT are released from the liver in GTT, I think it is. They're released from cells when they die. And so if there's high levels of these liver enzymes, that means there's more liver cells dying. Well, why is that? So it's not necessarily, it's not just EGCG, but any group of herbs, medications, alcohol, carbohydrates, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is probably the most common thing.
But your liver is supposed to die, though, because it reproduces, right? That's the whole point of your liver.
There's always like normal ranges of these liver enzymes, are like 19, 20. That's okay. When we get above 40, 50, that means too many cells are dying. So yes, that's normal. Our whole body, all the cells are going to die, basically. Even the brain used to think, oh no, brain cells, they're always there. They do die, and they are replaced to a certain extent.
I feel it. I feel it every day.
Yeah. And then, but same thing, our whole body. And so, you can take your finger or nail and scrape off, and there's cells here I just scraped off. Those are some dead cells. Happens in the body. Our body heals quickly, and so yes, death and growth is normal, but too high of too many chemicals going through the liver, and so people with cancer often are going to take a ton of supplements, chemotherapy, drugs, other medications. It's just a lot of times a lot. So if we see those liver enzymes go up, then we have to go back. Okay, well, what are those chemicals going through the liver?
Now compare that the EGCG, was that
Go back to yes, you got it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so compare that to berberine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they're both over the counter, which one is better?
Oh,
or are they just two different things?
Well, I do both.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I have to admit, I do both. Often, recommend both. And so, berberine is a drug. Okay, in all essence, because it says berberine HCl after it.
Yes.
What they've done is they've taken that berberine molecule out of some plants,
hydrochloride,
add hydrochloride to it, so now it exists in a powder form. So it actually is made more like a drug. It's not a prescription, but it is more like a drug than anything else. But it's still a natural basis. Matter of fact, even metformin, most prescription drugs come from natural products.
Yeah.
Okay. So metformin, even, which lowers blood glucose, came from a natural product. And so berberine, is a natural derivative, and you take it before you eat, and it decreases the absorption of carbohydrates. But it also, in different type of mechanisms, also decreases the growth of cancer cells. So whether you take it with a meal with that or not, it's going to get into your body, into your blood system, and get into and interrupt some cancer cell growth. So it's more than one thing. So I actually do both. I take both of the berberine before I eat. I mentioned about the beans. So I'll eat the bean, or I take my capsules, EGCG, and berberine. And there's some pathway products I like to use for that. I'll take those before I eat. I'll eat and then follow up with my blood glucose and ketone level, after that meal. And 2 hours after that, my ketones are higher and my blood glucose is lower than it was before I actually had that meal. The supplements help out. So I do okay, but when I do those supplements, they actually decrease the carbohydrate absorption, and both the glucose is down and ketones are higher.
Yeah, you always hear people chatter about, oh, well, you got to take it with meal, take it with some fat, take it soluble with fat, blah, 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 whatever. I do intermittent fasting, and I don't let my meals dictate my life, my medicine, right? So I take my fenbendazole and my cocktail that I take that, which we didn't even talk about yet.
No.
I take a 5 ingredient. Actually, I just changed it. There's like 7 ingredients now, but I take that without food because I do intermittent fasting, and my intermittent fasting is more important to me than anything, because I feel so good, So, but what's your take on the absorption aspect? I figured if I take enough of it, it's going to accumulate in my body.
Yes, absorption of what now?
Berberine or fenbendazole or whatever.
Yeah. So so yes, taking things with foods or before foods is probably overall a minor thing, except if a person has elevated blood glucose. And so if they have a whether it be a diabetes or pre-diabetes, or I'll even call it a pre-diabetes, not ideal blood glucose, fasting in the morning or 2 hours after a meal, I'm going to actually make sure that they're going to take those before they eat. And so, yes, actually proteins and fats with carbohydrates will slow down the absorption and won't allow the carbohydrates to spike your blood glucose as bad. So that's probably where the dairy thing may come back. When we go back to the beginning, when you mentioned that, is that the dairy does have some proteins and some fats too. And so that's going to blunt the impact on blood glucose, but you're still got all that glucose. It's just going to blunt it. It's still in there. We still are going to be absorbing it, but just won't have that spike, and the crash maybe as much. So, and some things are better absorbed a little bit, with meals or with fats. And so whether it be repurposed medications, or supplements, even timing can have a little bit of an impact. It's kind of a minor thing. It depends on the person and the cancer and their health issues.
Well, speaking of the spike in sugar. It made me think about the diabetes aspect again, I, the American Medical Association, their recommendation for a diabetic, their dietary recommendation, it appears to be something that I would stay far, far away from. With my dad, I mentioned that he's now off insulin. He's doing intermittent fasting, and it's kind of a uh, a custom version of intermittent fasting because he does have some issue, with his sugar or whatever. But he was doing the recommended diet, and oh my goodness, his sugar was through the roof. Like, it was designed to keep him on insulin. I mean, what is your take on that?
Well, I think, I'm not a believer that I'll just put it this way. I like to think that overall mankind is good. Okay. They want to help people and things like that. Businesses can get involved, and businesses help with the education of the medical groups, and so, I hate to say that.
Say it, Keith.
Problem. I just don't like to think that people would do that. But then a psychiatrist friend of mine that I've done podcasts with, he said, but Keith, there are bad people out there. And yes, there are. I mean, there's people cheating and stealing and killing and things like that. And yes,
don't be an enabler, Keith. Don't be an enabler.
I'm not trying to enable at all either. Excuse me. And so, but part of it is they just don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. The doctor really doesn't know. They're not trained that way. And they don't have the time. You're not paying them. They're used to making a lot of money. And for them to get that much money, they have to see how many 10 people an hour or something like that. And so therefore you're not going to get their time, and they aren't going to have the time unless they have an interest due to a personal type issue about learning outside the traditional training that they received. Just like the rest of us, you've changed what you used to do. Okay. With your challenge, you've dove in and you've made a lot of challenges. How many doctors are going to do that unless they have a challenge?
Exactly. When they have skin in the game.
That's right. And they don't. Otherwise, like the rest of us, they're looking for the easy way. And the public's the same way. Let's just go. I'm going to go, down the middle of that grocery store, and just pick up all the box and prepared foods, and take them home. And that's what we're going to eat because that's quick and easy. We want the easy button. So, but it takes work, and that's where it work. But also, we just don't know. But it's education. Yeah. We got to help share this information, share this podcast with other people.
Absolutely. I mean, to be clear, though, I don't in any way, shape, or form vilify any Western medicine or doctors, because my doctors truly did save my life. They kept me alive long enough, and the Western medicine did work for me. If you understand the job of Western medicine, the job of the chemotherapy is to suppress the disease. It's not to eradicate it. So it did work for me. It worked for me for a few years. Like it suppressed it long enough for me to figure things out on my own. So they did do an excellent job. My doctors were brilliant. And I am so grateful, that they kept me alive for as long as they did. But that brings me back to some other chemical, non-natural things that are being used today, like the Don and this DCA is now they have a clinic right here in Florida for DCA. So do you have an opinion between the comparison of the two?
Well, I have to admit, I haven't studied them in detail, okay, to where I can compare and say one's going to be better than another. I haven't had the time to do that, kind of like I already talking about the doctors. I have so much time in a day. And so I haven't studied and compared the two of them. The reason is I'm not a medical doctor. I can't prescribe it. And how many people have access to those? So therefore, I'm not going into that area at this
Yeah.
time. And
Well,
as it becomes more mainstream, definitely as more people have access to these things, I'll definitely will learn more. But
yeah.
there's other things that so many basic things that people need to be making a change on: the metabolic, the foods,
Yeah.
lifestyle.
Well, yeah. So your role in this battle is you're handing out the weapons, and you're doing the lifestyle, the nutrition, all the poison that we're putting into us. You're combating that aspect of it,
Right.
while the doctors, those guys could do the other angle of it, and it's a multi-dimensional, war, really. But
Yes.
the Don attacks the mitochondria of cancer cells, whereas the DCA it's an actual an inhibitor of glutamine metabolism in the cancer cells. So I think they do two different things.
Okay.
And
I'm not an expert on that.
yeah, and I don't know that one is exclusive to the other. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know, right? So I don't really dance around stuff that I'm not educated on. So I figured I'd breach the topic and just identify what the two things do.
Right.
But there will be more to come on this, I'm sure. I mean, well, the Don, Dr. Seafried talks about that.
Yes, exactly. He's doing research on those, and I'm sure we're going to hear more from him, in his research groups. I think he's got a couple of research studies, human studies going on right now. The challenge is finding practitioners to write the prescriptions for those, and meaning, how to dose it. So that's the challenge, because if you go with too high of a dose, you shut down the L-glutamine totally. That's a problem. You can't do that. And we have to have some L-glutamine. So timing it, dosing it is very important, on that. So, and that's where most doctors just don't know enough, and therefore they're not going to prescribe it.
Yeah, I think that I think that there's so many solutions. I think that there's so many solutions out there. If we can do it without chemicals and the way God intended, we're designed to be able to heal ourselves just with what has been put on this earth. It was the plan. That was the whole plan, right? Why did we call it Plan B when there was no necessary? It wasn't necessary to call Plan B. The original plan was working, and so I don't know. So anyway, I did want to touch on the ingredients of my little cocktail just to kind of get your take on that. Fenbendazole, the anti-parasitic. We talked about curcumin. Which I want to dive into a little bit. The AHCC is an active hexose correlated compound. I don't know if you use that at all. It's mushrooms, a collection of mushrooms. So the samidine that's the active ingredient integument, and that is what I tried to get into it earlier, the histamine connection, right? That, and also annatto, which is just, one part of the vitamin A. So anyway, so those are the 5 ingredients. And then I told you I added berberine, and I also added ivermectin because of the half-life in your body. What else did I say I added? The fenbendazole, and I added the berberine and the ivermectin, sorry. But yeah, and a Claritin for autophagy.
Yes.
And that was where the histamine question came in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I didn't know what your take is on any of those ingredients as to how it relates to what you prescribe, so to speak, in your practice.
Mm-hmm. So if a person has cancer, I feel like we have to do as many things as possible. And so if you just do radiation, some of those cancer cells are going to survive that. If you just do chemo, some of the cancer cells are going to survive that. If you have surgery, there may be some cancer cells that are going to escape that. So we've got to do as many different things. And so the food aspects, the supplement aspects, And then this repurposed medication. So like histamine is actually an inflammation chemical. And inflammation stimulates cancer growth. I'm getting ready to make a podcast, a social media post about periodontal disease, gingivitis and periodontitis. That increases risk of almost all cancers. That up here, just that little inflammation here, increases the risk of cancers elsewhere throughout the body. There's enough stimulating inflammation chemicals here. So inflammation is not just arthritis pain or joint pain. It can be other things. Therefore, that's the cimetidine, and the loratadine, the Claritin, are H1 histamine 1 antagonists, and they help decrease histamine levels, which is that inflammation driver. So that's going to be one of those drivers. So once again, inflammation stimulates cancer cells. So we got to address that. So whatever the cause, and so Claritin type things are definitely part of it. And then the other drugs, once again, I'm willing to recommend whatever a person needs to do. The more things we can hit it, the better. So we keep mentioning Thomas Seyfried. That's what he's doing. He's doing several different things. He's not just relying on glucose. He's not just relying on glutamine. He's doing several different things and different things that can still impact all of those, but there's multiple benefits. So yes, so repurposed drugs, and there's even the aspirin, the NSAIDs, the anti-inflammatory drugs, also are anti-inflammatories and decrease risks of cancers and growth of cancers. Dipyridamole, an old anticoagulant drug, also has some significant cancer type things. Enzymes on empty stomach eat away at the cell walls of the cancers and the tumors and improve circulation. So enzymes or dipyridamole, can help improve circulation, and that helps improve outcomes. So there's a whole list of things, and it can get kind of complicated. So not everybody has to do everything. Like you picked these 5, 6, 7 type items. You have to pick those things, but you have to get enough of them to make a difference.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the multidimensional approach, always keeps a pressure. It always keeps pressure on the disease, right? So whether you're flailing in one area or the other, you're keeping the pressure on the disease at all times, right? So, we had talked about earlier of, let me go back for a second. Where's your practice at?
I'm in Oklahoma City.
Okay. So you're in Oklahoma City, but you also see people virtually also, right?
Yes. All over the world. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I do virtual appointments.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So what is the name? How do people get in touch with you?
Yes. So thank you. So it's Prevail Over Cancer. So the website, prevailovercancer.com. The social media is Prevail Over Cancer.
Okay.
So those are the easiest ways, and you can type that on the internet or social media, and my information will start popping up.
I'll tell you what, the correlation that you made, at least in my mind, the connections that just from what you were saying with cholesterol being a pre-hormone, so to speak.
Yes.
And then its relation to hormonal-based cancers. You always think about sugar, glucose, glutamine. You always think about that stuff, carbohydrates, starches, but you don't think about cholesterol being connected to the growth or promotion of cancer. You always think about the sugar and stuff. You don't think about cholesterol. You think about your heart when you think about cholesterol. Right. So it just that topic alone out of this conversation has blown my mind, and it's going to leave me thinking about this for a while, because I feel like I really need to expound for my own edification, just so I know.
Process.
Everything seems to be connected. Diabetes, brain the brain diseases, the Alzheimer's, dementia, the diabetes, the sugar, the cholesterol, the heart disease. Now everything's connected. And it all has to do with what we're putting in our mouth.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That's the biggest problem.
Oh
That's
my
the biggest
goodness.
problem. There's the lifestyle issue. So there are some jobs that are going to expose us to certain chemicals that make it more difficult. I mean, there's a lot more, but the one thing that we can change is what we eat and the timing and the quantity. But that all goes back to what we eat. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is the most important thing. If you don't make those changes in what you're eating, your odds of survival go down tremendously. You
Man.
can't just take a pill. You can't take a pill. You can't take, the ivermectin, the Fenbin, and all these things and expect a miracle if you're still putting crud in your body.
Man. Well, I'll tell you, Keith Bishop, what social media sites are you on?
Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok. What else is there? I haven't done Pinterest yet, so is that still around? Anyways, I do all of those and a daily post.
Okay. You do a daily post and all that. You do these shorts too. I mean, I watch you all the time.
Yeah. YouTube. That's right, YouTube. So I've been doing some. So usually my videos, I get to talking. I can't make it under 60 seconds. So I have to, we'll kind of edit those and people go, oh, you didn't tell us the final story. Because I can't get it in 60 seconds. In a minute and a half on other social media platforms, it's a challenge to get those main points across. But that's why I make frequent posts, just to keep educating. I've got a newsletter I send out. I have a ton of free downloadable guides on my website.
Now it's all under Keith Bishop, or it's all under your
Prevail Over Cancer.
Okay. All right. So, well, thank you so much. We did run over, but I'm going to break this down into 2 segments because this was such great information. And I know that you have several appointments after this one. So I know I kind of stole you for a little bit too long, but thank you so much.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. No, it's great to share this information. I appreciate what you're doing in sharing this information, because this is going to impact not just one person, but hundreds and thousands of people. It's great.
Well, I hope that you're as excited about this as I am, because I'm going to share this with you, and I hope you share with a bunch of people too, because you have a great platform as well. If you guys don't follow him, make sure you find him on whatever social media platform you're used to or you're comfortable with, because it's crazy now, right? So a lot of people get censored and stuff like that. That's why I got my own website, beatingcancertoday.com, because I have an offshore server, so they can't censor me on that. But they are plucking my videos and content off of YouTube and Twitter and Facebook. Rumble is really good. Rumble, I could pretty much just speak our free speech. Mm-hmm. And also Brighteon.com is another one that we don't have any problems with censorship. Brighteon.com and Rumble.com are our 2 non-censored, and beatingcancertoday.com, but Keith, thank you so much for everything. I'm just so very grateful. And I'm going to share this produced and edited version with you. So
great. Yeah,
all right. Well, thank you again for tuning in, and we will check in with you guys next week. We'll see you soon.
All right, great.